We are happy to be doing part number 2 here of our Spacemap Go sessions. We're going to dig a little deeper into trajectories and building some cues and stuff for show purposes. And then we're going to do a little bit on QLab at the end as well. So that's my part. So without any more, I'm going to hand it over to Peter to get us started here.
Hey everybody, thanks for showing up. It's great. I appreciate it. And Ger, thanks for having me. So we're going to pick up kind of where we left off. I'm going to do, for those of you who were at the other one, I'm going to share my screen here with a little keynote. So everybody should see the keynote. So yeah, just a quick review of some of the stuff that we talked about last time to get us up to speed. So Spacemap's been a feature of the LCS series and with a 20 plus history. I've used it for probably 20 years or so, maybe a little less. So it's certainly not a new idea. A lot of the algorithms and the concepts have been around for a long time and successfully deployed in large shows like Cirque, and certainly at the Stratford Festival we've used a lot of stuff. For those of you who don't know, I have a 25-year history at the Stratford Festival among other places, but there we had Q console systems and did a lot of work with this kind of stuff. Good technical term stuff. So what it is an audio spatialization and live mixing tool, and it allows the user to add localization and motion to a sound field in a room, in a space. The cool thing is that it had existed in various levels of platforms with the Q console and Q Station and LCS series of products, and I guess still does with Dimitri. But it's been updated and ported to run on Galaxy processors and simply controlled by an iOS interface. So you don't need a bunch of computers, and you don't need all the bells and whistles that we used to have it running on an LCS system. Certainly fantastic if you have a Dimitri system, but if you don't, it's kind of cool that it's the computer under the hood, I guess, of the Galaxy is essentially, as many of us always suspected, is actually an LCS sort of frame type engine. And so they were able to get the software to run on it in addition to the software that it already runs to do all the system processing and magic that it already does. So it's highly flexible, scalable, and customizable. And if you already have a Meyer Galaxy processor and an iPad, it's free. In this day and age, it's kind of amazing. But the addition of the Spacemap Go software into the Galaxy is just included. You just basically tell the Galaxy to run in Spacemap mode, and then you connect to it with an iPad. Or any iOS device, right? You can use a phone. Is that right, Jeff? Not if that's true. Shake your head if I'm lying.
No, I won't work on the phone, I don't believe, but any
so it's just
iPad or anything like iPads. That. Yeah.
Okay. And actually, I think they're working on a client-based laptop version too, but it's not there yet.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it starts with a piece of virtual graph paper, which will become your map. One of the things that's kind of interesting to think about is that the map is two-dimensional, but it doesn't have to be you don't have to think of it in ground plan. You could also think of it as an elevation, depending on what it is you're trying to do. I know that one successful technique that's been used at Stratford in the past is to have, especially in a proscenium house, is to have a space map that represents the sort of upper proscenium speaker, center cluster, lower proscenium speakers, front fill or effect speakers that are across the front of the stage, and to create almost like a picture box, elevation type space map to be able to image sounds within that picture frame, which is kind of a important thing that you don't always have to think of it as being in plan. So on this piece of paper, virtual paper, you create, as we don't want to kill any trees, you create a graphical representation of your sound system. In a way that represents the physical relationships between the speakers. Another interesting thing about this is that you can reflect it within the context of your existing sound system or your existing theater. Obviously there are certain approaches that work better, And if you only have a small number of speakers, it's not going to work as a large number of speakers as well. But whatever combination you have, you can represent them. It isn't like you have to have it in a particular configuration. Whatever layout you have, you can create those relationships between the speakers and then get immersion and localization within it. So the first thing we do is we drop the actual speaker nodes. So all of the points on the graph they call nodes. So we drop the speaker nodes on the paper here. This is going to eventually become a 5.1 type simple system. So the blue squares represent speaker nodes. Oh, I'm not looking at the chat. So Peter and Jeff and anybody else, if there are, well, not anybody else, but Ger people, if there are questions, then just let me know at an appropriate time, because I'm not looking at the chat, although it's lovely to see all of you nice people. So the blue square nodes are the speaker nodes, and they represent the actual output of the Galaxy processor. So on a single 816, you'd have up to 16 of these nodes available. More if you start cascading processors. In this case, we just have 5 to represent left, center, right, left surround, and right surround. And then what you can do is that if you have a space in between where you want where you'd love to have a speaker but you don't, and you don't want the sounds to jump too quickly from point to point of the speakers you do have, you can create something called a virtual node. And the virtual node derives its signal, or actually distributes its signal to the appropriate speaker that it is connected to or affiliated with. So in this case, the circle in the middle there is a virtual node, and you can see the sort of, I don't know, elastic, stretchy bits there connecting to each speaker indicates that its signal is derived from all 5 of the speakers. So if in the map you were to place a sound right in the middle of the map, then it would be deriving its signal from all, or it would be distributing its signal to all 5 of those speakers in order to create the sensation that it's in the middle. That sort of thing. Or if you need a point between 2 speakers or any of those things. So those are virtual nodes. Now, obviously, physics still matters. So you can't just have like a 2-speaker system and then add 6 virtual nodes around them and somehow expect for, I mean, that'd be cool, but it doesn't do that. So again, the number of speakers you have is sort of going to influence how successful those virtual nodes are going to be. If you stretch them too thin, then they're basically just starting to distribute sound everywhere. Keep that in mind, is you can't just get immersion from 1 speaker and add 16 virtual nodes. Well, that would be kind of funny. Yeah, I don't know how okay, you'd have to have at least 2 speakers to have a virtual node. So in some cases, you might need to have an output that gets its signal from multiple nodes regardless of position. So for example, subwoofers and maybe some fill speakers. So you might have an under balcony or a front fill where you actually need to say that no matter where the location that you're trying to image to is on the map, that the energy will always go to the subwoofers, for example. You wouldn't want, as you move around the room, to have the sound also go in and out of the subwoofers. And that isn't to say that you couldn't have 2 zones of subwoofers. You could have a zone of subwoofers that's at the front of the room and a zone that's at the back. And in that case, the speakers at the back would have a derived node or the subwoofer at the back would have a derived node from the 2 speakers at the back, and the subwoofers at the front would have a derived node from the speakers at the front. So you still get the motion, and now the subwoofer is also moving as well, or the image of the sub energy. So drive nodes, you link the node. Yes, derived nodes. So that's the sort of, what is that? Hexagonal? Pentagonal? Hexagonal. Let's go with hexagonal. The Allen key one up there. So one of the things about Spacemap that has always been is that the algorithm for it, which I believe was developed in Australia or something, but I could be wrong about that, is it uses an algorithm that's based around the triangle and distributing equal energy throughout the triangle, depending on what position you are within that triangle. So the way the system works is to subdivide the map or to actually to connect the nodes by triangles, a series of triangles, and they call them trisets. So in this case, you can see in the 5.1, we have 5 trisets. Each one consists of 3 nodes. In all cases, there are 2 speaker nodes and 1 virtual node. That is how the algorithm generates the or decides how much energy goes to each physical speaker and creates the node. And it's actually a key element of a good space map, is figuring out which triset and how to distribute the trisets. So those are trisets. So in this case, with our trisets allocated and our speaker nodes, virtual nodes, and derived nodes, thank you. It took me a second. We now have a space map that's viable and would essentially be a 5.1 type mix environment, which could be for doing a 5.1 mix in a studio, or it could be a 5.1 type situation in a theater or in a concert hall or something like that. The other type, there's one other type of node that's important, and it's called the silence node. And the silence node allows you to have a node that's connected to a triset, and as you approach that node, the sound actually disappears to silence. So this allows us, in this case, you can see I've distributed a bunch of silence nodes on the outside of the space map, so that if you were to move the image with your location pointer type thingy beyond the speakers, it starts to fade out. So if you were doing something like the classic helicopter flyover, you could have the helicopter approach from silence, then emerge into the speaker system, and then swoop around the room, and then as it leaves, it would depart again into silence. So the silence nodes are really important and give you another tool of being able to really customize the map to do what it is you want it to do. And generally, I've found that the silence nodes are usually on the outside of the map for exactly that purpose. But again, a silence node is just a node. If you had some reason to put it in the middle of your map, you can do that. And they also need to be part of a triset. And then once they are, then the energy in the algorithm decides how much goes to silence and how much goes to not silence. You can make your space map simple, like the 5.1, or you can make it quite complicated. This one looks super complicated because of all the extra virtual nodes and that sort of thing. But yeah, essentially this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, it says there 7 channel collinear type situation, which has become very popular these days, of doing multiple hangs of clusters, maybe a larger hang on either side, and then say 5 hangs across the center. And you can see that there's a couple of subwoofers there as well. And this one, I didn't design this one, but it's fun to look at. And this would allow you to do a very detailed linear imaging type situation across the front of a stage, which is great. I haven't actually used this kind of thing, but I look forward to using it soon, because it's become such an interesting approach. So point is, you can make it a very simple space map, or you can make it a very complicated space map. I'll just have to change one thing here. There we go. So how do we move this? How do we move sound in space map? There's 2 ways to do this. Have to be on this window when I press that button. There we go. The first is to move what I call the location marker. And I can't remember whether this is the official Meyer term, but it's something along those lines, to a location within the space map. And then you can see in the matrix value across the top of the window there, you can see values left, center, nothing in the right, sub, left, rear. Basically, as you move that location, you'll see it when we look at it on the app. As you move it around, you'll see those values change. But you could do just a static location. You don't have to have the helicopter move. You could just have a dog bark at a certain location, or in the case of collinear, maybe you want to, you don't want to have motion for the violins. You just want to have them be where they are reflected on stage. So, so in that case, you again would park the location marker where you want in the mix, and then leave it. If it creates the correct imaging, then that's great. So it's super quick and super precise, and you don't have to get any animation or motion going. You can just actually just move the location marker to where you want it to be and leave it. That's for a stationary effect. And if you do want motion, then we get into what are called trajectories. So in this case, you can see there's a space map and there's a circular trajectory path, and the location marker is currently at that location, but you can have it move along that path, and you can design the trajectories to be whatever you want them to be. Quick details on the hardware, and then we'll be through the revisiting refresher part. So the 32 input side to the spacemap matrix is fixed. That's what it maxes out at, and it can be a combination of physical, analog, or AES inputs, or it can be AVB inputs. So even with a single 816, you can have 8 physical inputs of either AES or analog, and 24 AVB inputs. So you'd end up in that case with a 32 by 16 system. But you can also link multiple Galaxy processors together, and so you could have you still only end up with 32 on the input side. So with 4 units, 4 816s, for example, would give you 32 analog or AES inputs. You wouldn't have to use the AVB on the input side, and you'd have quick math, 64, is that right? 64 times 16 outputs. So pretty big matrix, all accessible through the space map. And yeah, I think upwards of 256 outputs. You can continue to cascade on these galaxies and continue to have more and more output processing, because each device has its own processor.
Recording.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I can't hear you. Did somebody say they had a question?
I heard something, but I don't know if it was a question or if it was just a Zoom glitch.
Could be. Somebody's dog barked. I don't know.
Nobody in the chat is saying anything, so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, and then of course within the galaxy, you still get all the processing of the galaxy, because the space map side takes up processing that isn't affiliated with the existing galaxy processing. So you still have all the parametric, EQ, all pass, U-shaping, high pass, low pass, delay, and all of that sort of thing, and delay matrix as well. The one thing that you lose control of, obviously, is the actual matrix cross points, because you can the space map takes over the matrix side of things. So any value you put in there would be moot. You would program it through the space map side instead. All right, does that make any sense? I hope it makes sense. Does that any other questions? The app is free, and I think you can run it on like a virtual type thing, so you can play around with it if you want. But that's the overview and the concept and the quick recap of a lot of what we covered last time. If there's no other questions, then we can switch over to the app. Which I'll do
I think
now.
you're good to go.
All right. So you should be able to see the app on the screen. Hopefully that's true. And so we'll quickly just look at the sort of overview of I'm gonna have a sip of water. We're gonna look at an overview of the app software to see what's where, basically by looking at the 5 tabs across the bottom. So the mix window shows you in usually in groups, in banks of 8, the input channels and how they're assigned to their various space maps. So you can see there's 8 across there, and each one is controllable. In this case, I have 1 and 2 linked, so you can see their location marker is actually following they're in sync. Yeah, and you can page over to see the other. There's 9 through 16. And etc. And then when you go to overview, you actually can see all of the channels, or whatever combination of channels you want to see. You can see on the left, you can turn on certain channels, you can turn off certain channels, depending on what it is you want to see. And from here, you can actually move and manipulate the individual space map. So this would be good if you were doing like a big collinear mix, then you'd be able to see your whole orchestra sort of overlaid, and you'd be able to fine tune that you want the violins there, violin 1 there, and violin 2 there, or whatever. And so this is, it's not a bad way to work. Although if you can imagine, with 32 markers, it could become quite cluttered. So it's nice to be able to see that, but it's also really nice to be able to look at them individually back on the this other page. Somebody asked this last time, so I'll just flag this as well. This link button that allows you to link the two sides, you can either have them not linked, and then there's a variety of things. You can have them linked, or you can also do like mirrored situations. So now you can see they're going opposite directions. If you know you want left always going to left and right going to right, you can change how they're linked. If you have them linked in mono, then they just track together. So that's certainly an option. And there's functions available here for you can mute, you can solo. And there's a fader for the control of the overall level. So console functions available on this level. I have to say that I'm not sure what SPRD is. Oh, spread. Yeah, that was one of my questions actually for Josh at some point, is what the spread does. I don't know.
I think it's more of like a focus and kind of a width in the stereo world, that kind of a thing.
I thought so too, although I was playing with it the other day trying to figure out what it was doing, and I wasn't evident, but I'm sure it's something wonderful. So we'll come back to this page in a minute. If you want to look at a specific individual channel, then you can go on to the next. At the bottom you see is now blue where it says channel, and you can page over at the top here to get to page across your different channels. So now I'm looking at a more close-up view of a single channel. So this is good for very specific work. And if we have it, once we have a trajectory loaded, there's information on the right side that shows you. Let's see, do I have a trajectory loaded? Yeah. So there on channel 3, you can see the details about the trajectory as well. So you can edit certain parameters and play with that, which we'll get back to in a minute. And from this window, you still also get control of mute and solo and level, so that you're never too far away from being able to mute something if there's a problem, or being able to solo it if you really want to hear the details of what you're working on. And we'll look at that right window in a minute. Set list is all about controlling and building cues and presets and that sort of thing. The mix snapshots are sort of an overview global type snapshot, and then our channel snapshots, which you see on the right hand side, are more specific to a certain number of channels. You'll see underneath each one of them it says start out A and B, channels 1 to 4, top of show. So this you could think of more being like your cue list of what it is you're doing, and on the left, the mix snapshots, you could think of it more as your show. That's at least how I see it kind of working. So that's all about that side of things. And you'll see also that on the top level, you'll see on the right, you can see, for example, on the one we're on fade out right now, it says 7 seconds. And there's a grayed out window before that that is a wait time. So again, you can get into some basic cue list type structure type things where you can say snapshot group details. You can set a wait time and a transition time right from here. And one of the coolest things too is you see external recall ID 1001, and that is it allows you to send a message via OSC to be able to recall the cue from any number of OSC type devices. Anything that speaks OSC can control these, and they can control these with presets, or as Jeff will show you later, they can control you with more specific details. And you also can then go even further, and we could change the transition time for one side to be from 7 to the other one could be 90. So now when you see I've changed it, there's a 90-second wait before the fade happens on channel 1, and no such wait on the right. Don't know why I would do that, but you never know what you're going to need to do. But the ability to actually change those values is channel to channel is pretty great. Lets you get control of lots of things. And obviously from here you can if I do recall selected snapshot and I go back to the mix, it was probably already fade out, so you didn't actually see anything. We could do start out, and you can see some things moved. And you can see some faders are moving and some trajectories are starting. So from here, you can recall your selected snapshots or your mixed snapshots. Create we'll look at in a deeper dive in a minute, but this is where you actually create your space maps and your trajectories. And then under settings, you get access to a whole variety of things. One of the probably most used things is under external device connection. And this is where you set up all your OSC type things, console connections, interfacing with Dimitri, all of that good stuff, and the basic basic settings for the I guess this is for the this isn't for the Galaxy IP. This would be for the iPad's IP. So normal settings type things. So let's take a look at some things. Let's go in. So when you go to look at your channel and you want to load a space map, in the top right of these windows, you see select space map. You see this window here, which shows you the currently loaded space map. But if you do the sort of up, down, cycle through menu, you get a menu now. So unlike in the old LCS days, there's a whole set of presets that get you up and running pretty quickly. And so if you know that you're working in a 5.1 environment, you can just go ahead and choose which kind of 5.1 you're in. And there's a variety of different 5.1s that are available. So you could just choose 5.1 alternative. You can choose to add channels to what you're going to load the same space map into. And now you can see my first 4 channels are all loaded with the same space map ready to be used. But if we don't like that and we want to make our own, we can go select space map. We go into the gallery, and then we oh, I've done this wrong. We go into the create, sorry. You go into space maps under the create tab, and you say create new space map. And we did this quickly before. I'll do the same thing. We did a left, center, right, and a couple of surrounds, and then a subwoofer. And so you can see those were the speaker nodes. You can add the other nodes across the top. If you click, I'm going to go to select now. If you go to the select on the right, now I can select a single node. If I click and hold it, I can drag it around, and the grid becomes very helpful because I can use the grid to line things up to make it so things are equally spaced. And if I click on them, come on. You just click and hold, and then they activate with that little crosshair. And if you go into any one of these things, you can see left, center, right, and then sub, left, rear, right, rear. Well, we said that with the sub, I actually don't. I want it to be a derived node, so I don't want it. I actually want this one to be the sub up on the top left. These other ones I want it to be. So left is correct, center is correct, right is correct. This is the sub. I don't want it to be the sub. So you can edit that by clicking up on here, and you can say set output. And so I don't want that output to be the sub. I want it to be the left rear. And then I want to go over here, and I want to make this one the right rear. And now I want this to be my sub. So it allows you just to basically populate your map with whatever you want, and then change the values of what it's actually feeding after the fact if it hasn't come out the way you want it to. So those are our actual speaker nodes. If we want to create a virtual node now, We go back to the Add tab on the right, and we can drop one right in the middle. And then you have this button that says Link Speaker. So we go up here and we select the speakers. They shoot out their webs. And we now have linked speakers for our virtual node. I'm going to skip silence nodes for a second. Derive nodes, we want this sub to be a derived node. So we want to oh, actually, I did this wrong. I apologize. I should delete that. We add that. It's a derived node now, and now we get to choose what we're linking it with. And it's a subwoofer, so we're going to link them with all of them. And that's, I'm happy with that. So there we go. And then we need to build our trisets. I'm going pretty quickly on this because we covered all this last time. But as a refresher, so we can do auto build our trisets, and it goes and populates the trisets. It's pretty easy space map, so it did a good job. But if we want to change those trisets, we can edit them. And then the last thing we would want to do is we would want to go through and create a bunch of silence nodes. And we'll see what the auto build triset thing does with this. So there, it populated a bunch of trisets to make the silence nodes work. So we now have a space map that's 5.1 with a silence surround around it. It's pretty quick to build, and we're ready to use it. We can go in here and we can give it a name. If I want to save it to the iPad. Why isn't it saving my...
I think you're good, Peter. It just takes it as it is. So.
Oh, okay. It doesn't update the name here?
No, it is on the side there, yeah.
Oh, okay. So once you've built it, you can actually go into this test mode, and you can move. You can see as we move around, we can see the values in the matrix in the top left moving. As I go out to the silence mode node, we should see it disappears to silence, and away we go. All right. So a couple of things about this. So I showed you how to change the node to be a different output if you want. Each one of these nodes now there's certain things you can do to change them. If you want to change the speakers that the derived node is affiliated with, you can get in and change it. One of the things we didn't look at last time is you can actually change there's more parameters available. So for example, if you go into regular speaker nodes and you click on the ... you get access to a trim. And this is super valuable because maybe your left and right are big, more powerful arrays. And so you need to actually dim them down a little bit. Maybe they're 10 dB too hot. So you can go over here on left and right, and in order to get them to work, or 110, that'd be cool too. Now you're putting them more in line with the rest of the PA because maybe your surrounds and your center are less powerful. Same thing with your subwoofer. To be able to go in and ... you can set maybe the sub is too hot as it goes through, and so I know sub's too hot never, right? So then again you can dim that down a little bit. You obviously from the ... could delete the node. You also can delete the node from the garbage can. If you have something selected, you see there's a delete garbage can available, so you don't have to get into the ... but if you are, in the virtual nodes, again, you can choose what speakers you're linking to change them, and then you also get, with the virtual nodes, you get what's called link weight. And link weight allows you to change the amount, the proportion of the sound that goes in a virtual node. So let's say that from where your virtual node is, you actually need more energy to go to the center speaker, let's say, in the center cluster. So you could go into the center, and you could say that link weight, instead of being 20, you could make it 30%. And when you make it 30%, you'll see that on the left, it shows you what each link weight is. You can see it's now reduced everything else down to 17.5, so that the math still equals 100%. But now it's giving a higher priority to center. So in something, if you're trying to get the image that when you go across that virtual node across the center of the room, if the perception is best to have slightly more energy in that center speaker, then you can do that. Or maybe you want less in the rear speakers, that sort of thing. Oh, I've accidentally unlinked them too. So yeah, by clicking on them, you're also taking them out of the virtual node if you need to do that. Oh, interesting. When I take it out and put it back in again, it actually redistributes the 100% and it gives 0%. That looks like it might be a little bit of a bug, or at least undocumented feature, as Richard Bugg would say. Interesting. Now I'm chasing myself around to get them equal. Anyway, you can see how that all works. The link weight, though, is great to really be able to fine tune your space map so that you can get it those virtual nodes performing the way you want them to. Because sometimes it's about the space that they're located on the map, but sometimes it's also about the physical and the sort of the psychoacoustic aspect of what you perceive when you're in the space. Silence nodes, you just get to give them a name or delete them. There's not like more or less silence. They just are silence nodes. And the yeah, I think we already looked at this. The derive node, you just get the aspect of trim. In the tri-set editor, you can select a tri-set and you can delete it, and you can change it. Did somebody say something there?
No, just somebody entering.
Oh, okay. Welcome. So yeah, you could go in and you could delete that tri-set if you want to, and then you could create a new tri-set. Oh, I've gotten out of tri-sets there. There, build the tri-set again. So yeah, and I mean, the space maps, you can continue to just to create, you know, all kinds of crazy things of whatever it is that you want to create, whatever reflects your space. You can choose to have some speakers, like under balconies, might be connected together to be a derived node, anything along those lines. Any questions about space maps? There used to be a feature where you could actually overlay like a JPEG or whatever, and I was hoping that that's what would be in Canvas, but it isn't. So I don't know if that's something that they're working on. I don't know if you know anything about that, friends.
I've heard about it, but I know it's not ready just yet.
Yeah, you used to be able to do it within the QStation software. Okay, I'm going to say I'm done, and now if my save actually did work, yeah, you can see new 0.1 is down there at the bottom and ready to be deployed. So I can go back now to my mix and I can say select space map, and I can go down and find it and choose it and select my additional channel, and there it is, all ready to go. Any questions about space maps? The other aspect, of course, is the other thing that I'll show you on space maps that we didn't see before is that you'll notice when I say select space map, you'll see there's this other yellow button where it says add space map on the right. what's that about? That's pretty kooky. So I'm going to go down now and I'm going to say add another space map. And this space map, I'm going to choose, I don't know, a different 5.1. Choose this one, alternative. And then I'm going to say add it over. And so now you see that in the top left of each of these panels, there's new 5.1, which was the one I made, and 5.1 alternative. And there's a slider here that as you go across, you'll see when I get to 50%, it pops over to the alternative one. So what this allows you to do is crossfade between two separate space maps at the same time. And of course, if you're in 50%, you're actually operating in both space maps at the same time. So it allows you, and this of course can all be automated, and it allows you to have multiple space maps, well, two space maps active at the same time. So when I would use that, I've thought of a couple of places where I might use that. One I've used in the past, because you could do this back in the old LCS days, is you could have one space map that is actually elevation and one space map is ground plane. And you can actually try to have the interaction happen between those two or morph between the two. That's one place that I've used it. You could also have it, if you were doing an immersive project where you have two galleries and one gallery has an 8-speaker surround with a subwoofer and the other one has a 6-speaker surround and with a subwoofer. You could actually have two space maps, one laid out with 8 plus 8.1, one laid out with 6.1, overlay them on top of each other, and then when you're doing your programming of your trajectories and your motion and your localization, it'll be translatable between the two galleries, so sort of one-stop shopping. There's also kind of an interesting example that's, oh, my mic is drooping, I apologize. Droopy mic syndrome. There's an example that I thought of just the other day, because here in Stratford we have these outdoor canopies, and the Tom Patterson Theatre canopy is a traverse stage. So the stage goes across the middle of the audience with audience on both sides. And the sound system design we have there is basically each side has its own 5.1 system. So in this case, you actually could have double space maps happening with 50%. So that you're programming your motion in on one place, but it's mirrored on the other side, and the other space map could be mirrored so that the motion follows the same direction. But then you could use other channels with just a single space map if you want the sound to only appear on one side of the stage. You know, there's supposed to be a bird cry. You know, you don't necessarily want it to be in both 5.1's rear left. You might only want it to be on one. So you could still do it independently, but for the ease of doing things like music presentation or certain surround effects, you could do the programming on one with a dual space map and have it reflect in both. I also wondered, my brain started thinking about whether there's something interesting with the dual space maps to somehow do like a virtual orchestra shell, so that if you're doing a collinear arrangement for the front of house and you're imaging, you know, orchestral instruments, for example, across the front of the stage, could you also have almost like an overhead surround type situation on stage, and you could invert it so that the left side of the stage would hear a little bit of everything that goes to the right side of the front of house, if you know what I mean, so that you get some cross-pollination. So I started thinking about that, if there was a way to overlay those two using the dual space maps.
I could see using it as you know, a set of overhead speakers for sure. You know, you could create that height aspect of it by having a different layout that way, and then you use the slider there to adjust, you know, the actual height or how much of a mix you are between the two zones, basically.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah,
so
I've always thought of it to be a bit more of a 3D thing at a certain, not quite that, but could be used in that orientation.
That's certainly how I've used it in the past, is 3D, but my brain has started thinking about, wow, how else could it be used? Because it's kind of a cool feature that I don't know is in any of the other sort of immersion softwares, is to be able to have two maps running at the same time. I specifically think this idea of an immersive gallery is kind of interesting because, you know, there's a project that I'm working on where we do have a large gallery and a small gallery often. And so, yeah, to be able to have all the same programming running in on one channel, but distributed differently to the two rooms. So you don't have to constantly keep updating, oh, we made a change to room A, so now we have to go and make the same change to room B. You can just make the change in one place.
How often do you run with, like, how do you set your space maps up in terms of your channels? Do you run with the same one for everything, or have you done, had it all over the map where you have channel 1 and 2 as the same and then a different one for, 3, 4, or how do you approach that?
I actually think that some of those parameters are defined for you because it's sometimes about the I/O structure of the console, or depending on what your playback count is. So if you have a lot of flexibility on getting into the system, then you can spread it out more. In some cases, if you have less flexibility, then I might, like in a small installation, I might do, let's say we only have the 8 analog inputs or AES inputs. I might do 6 that are kind of fixed, and then 2 that are used for motion. But I mean, you can recalibrate it, and scene to scene you can change what you want to do. But that does kind of keep it organized. It keeps the programming a bit more organized and a bit leaner if you know that your first 4 channels or your first 8 channels are going to be more static in their use, and then you're doing the motion and trajectory work on 2 or 4 other channels, that sort of thing. But it depends. If the console has a lot more flexibility, then you might do a lot more. If that makes sense. So yeah, the dual space map thing is an interesting feature, and it's one of those things where it's not immediately evident how you're going to use it, but I see it being one of those things that could really save the day when suddenly you need something that fits that criteria, or a time saver. And certainly, as Jeff says, mixing in 3D where you have elevation and plane happening at the same time is particularly interesting.
One of the things that I find really interesting is that the space map doesn't actually have to be a representation of your physical speakers. It can be a virtual panner. It's a completely abstract concept. So say if you were going to run some reverbs, you could make a space map and you could have one speaker on a space map and another one on another location, but you could have the reverb, the stereo effect of the reverb already played out all over the room. And it's just a simple 2-channel space map at that point. And you can pan between multiple different scenarios within a space map as well. And it's, like I say, it doesn't have to be tied to a specific speaker layout.
Yeah, for sure. And the other place that I'd forgotten to mention that I see the dual space map thing working is in a situation where you have a very deep under balcony. Sometimes surround effects are terribly unsuccessful when you're trying to do the entire theater. But some things you could actually break the system into 2 different space maps, where one is the orchestra section and one is the underbalk, and you can still get motion, but it's sort of contained to 2 sound fields instead of 1. Because as Ian says, you can break it apart and use it to subdivide anything. You could have 64 speakers in your sound system, and you could have just 6 of them on a space map for outputs, depending on what it is you're trying to do. And yeah, certainly the idea of reverb is interesting, because you could actually use the outputs of the space map to feed into your favorite reverb or convolution reverb or whatever. And so you could set it up so that as it goes further in the distance from your main system, before it goes to silence, maybe it goes through a node that actually feeds into a reverb, and maybe it has a little bit of EQ on it, so you actually get a sense of distance before it fades away. That whole thing there's so much you can do, especially when you start thinking about increasing the number of outputs. As you increase the number of galaxies, you start to get into those permutations, combinations. I could, my brain goes to places where I have 4 channels or 4 stereo convolving reverbs, convolution reverbs, that as you go to each corner of the room, it's got a discrete reverb, and that's localized to that corner, so you can start to get not just level differences but quality differences as it shifts too. But yeah, the underbalk overbalk thing is kind of interesting, because you might have very different spaces. The Avon Theatre at Stratford, for example, is a very deep underbalk, and so when we try to do surround effects there, it becomes challenging, because you have whatever it is, the horses that are running around, and you hear them in that tight, confined space, you hear them come quite loudly as they pass the speaker that's behind you. And then it's difficult to get the same balance when you're trying to get it to have a complementary signal on the other side of the room. So I see we're close on time. I can keep going because there's lots for us still to get to. So so if people want to stay, I'm good to keep staying for a little bit. So trajectories, we're going to quickly look at some stuff with trajectories, and I try to actually be quick this time. So if we go up to build a new, sorry, I don't want to do spacemap, done. Trajectories. If we go and we want to build a new trajectory, it lets us start, there's two ways you can do it. You can do a continuous stream with your finger. You can start recording, and then you can do and you can finish recording, and then there's a trajectory, and you can run it. You can see that it's moving along the line. And in that case, the part we didn't get into last time is you look at the wait time and transition time. So each one of these points is editable, and you can go in and you can say, okay, on this point here, which is number 5, you can say I want to wait 4 seconds, and I want the transition time to actually be 2 seconds. And now when we go back to the beginning and we run it, you'll see it goes and it stops, and then it should slowly creep to the next node. There it goes, and then it takes off again. So this allows you to really fine-tune whatever your trajectory is. If you want that helicopter to come in and then hover for 10 seconds before it then moves on, then you can really play with these transition times and wait times. Like other aspects, if you push and hold, you get the crosshairs, and then you can move a point if you want to physically edit it. If you don't like the way this kind of returns back to itself. And then the other way to put in your and then there's also XY values for the points too, so you could punch in your things. If you want it to be a perfectly square box, you can just punch in the values manually. The other way to do it is actually when you start recording, you tap your points, and maybe this allows you to be more precise or whatever. But again, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how it's not recording in real time. It gives oh, actually, or did it? Oh, it looks like it did. Transition time. I lie. Or maybe that's just, no, it's probably just geographic. Yeah, it's just geographic. So it subdivides it. If it's further apart, it gives a longer transition time. So there's those two ways. And again, once they're all in, you can edit them till your heart is content. And then once you're happy with it, you save it as tulip on its side. And now when you go back to load a trajectory, should see, there it is, tulip on its side. And it's loaded in there. And now when we run it, you can see it's following that pattern. So the other thing I wanted to show you is when you look in the channel, and we go back to that tulip, there's a couple of things. There's that if you say, well, I don't want the tulip to be on its side, I want it to be right side up like any good tulip should be, you can actually pinch and squeeze within this window. So if I grab the trajectory and I rotate it, it now rotates. And if I squeeze, I can make it smaller. So maybe the motion was too wide for the room. Maybe the way I built the space map, it actually starts extending past the silence nodes, and I don't want that. And so you can just sort of pinch and roll it until it gets to the exact way you want it to be. And you can see as I do that, all the stuff on the right parameters, which you can enter manually if you want, if you know that you want it to be a certain thing, certain X, Y scale or whatever. But the idea of being able to just rotate it is pretty fantastic. Also over here, you can change its rate. So if I get it playing back, it's set to infinite repetition, so it'll just keep going. You can see under rate, I can make it go super slow because there's presets for 0.1, 0.5, 1, 5 times. You can also grab the knob and change it, or you can you can press where the, oh, I need this button reverses it. Or I can go up and I can actually say I want it to be plus 51. I don't know, make it go super fast. Okay, it's going to make me throw up, so I'm going to do that. And the other thing you can do is you can swipe it over, and now it gives you the ability to tap tempo. So you can tell it you want it to be 4 beats per trajectory, and you tap in the tempo, and then now it's following. So again, super fast to get something happening. So I think that's some of the newer stuff that I wanted to show you about building trajectories. And yeah, I think I said that the negative rate makes it go backwards. Any questions at this point? All right. So I'm going to stop that. I've got it set up to run on using some commands from OSC through QLab. So I'm going to run a little something. I'll look at the mix when I do it. All right, so this cleared the space maps and it started some content going. So I just wanted to do a quick little demo of how you could quickly just build something if you were, if you had some multi-track stems, or if you had a live orchestra or whatever, to get something happening. So you can see that I've got media coming in on 1 through 6. And so I could say, okay, well, it's a 5-point room. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to add a space map. I'm going to add I'll just add the first one here. 5.1 all. I'm going to select, I'm just doing a mix of this band or this music or whatever. So I'm going to create this situation. And then I'm going to bring up, there's some drums there. I'm going to say, okay, these drums I'm going to put in the left channel, and I'm going to bring up these other drums. I'm going to solo them, find a good level, move them over, unsolo them, bring up this bass part. Maybe I want to move it there. See what else I got here. Put that back there. Move that over. Let's see what this is. So I've just quickly put together an immersive mix using point locations. Maybe the drums and the bass I don't want to move, but I'm going to say, I'm going to grab, I don't know, this is a fun trajectory. I'll grab that one. I'll put that in and get it rocking. And then do a little side to side here. And front to back. And again, with these side to side, I can go in. This is on channel 5, so I can go over to my channel 5. And I'm going to go and tap my tempo. So now I've got it moving. So pretty quickly, I've got something interesting happening. And then when I want to save it all, I can, this might mess me up actually. Let's see. Yeah, I kind of got rid of it, but this is basically the same thing I did when I was getting ready for this. You can just recall it. So yeah, it's pretty quick to get something happening. Yeah, and then if there's no questions on that, I'm going to quickly unshare there. And I'm just going to show you a couple of, if there are questions, just let me know. I'm going to go back to my keynote. And I'll show you a couple of places of sort of concepts of how I might use the Spacemap Go in real situations of various sizes. So in a small theater with like a 5.1 type system that has no AVB available, I would use the 8 analog inputs or AES inputs from the console. And I might set them up as QLab console 1-to-1, for example, so assuming we're running with QLab. So what I mean by that is your left out of your QLab goes straight through to the left out within the Galaxy. I'd use that for the first 6 inputs. And then basically what you were saying before, Jeff, your question before, then I would have 2 wildcard inputs that I could use from movement. So from QLab, I could distribute the sounds in sort of static locations, and then I have these 2 other inputs that I can use to do the helicopter fly around and any of that stuff that's particularly cumbersome to get happening in QLab. Or I might do subgroups into the Galaxy with mics and music and utility, and then have 4 inputs left for trajectories. And that's the sort of space map you might see on the right. On a medium to large theater, I might use 8 analog inputs or AES inputs and set them up as sort of subgroups of various things that I might need. The mics, the RF mics, some sort of music channels, dedicated sub, reverb left and right, and utility, and then 24 outputs from QLab. So this is the idea: is a large show with reinforced mics maybe, and a lot of playback for imaging and motion and all that stuff. There might be other ways to set that up. As I say, you could also do a QLab 1-to-1 type thing, and then just use the last 8 for trajectories. This one I really am looking forward to trying. This one is for a medium to large localized musical. Again, hopefully we have AVB available so we can take advantage of it. But in this case, we have a collinear, 5-channel collinear speaker system in the front, and a 6-channel surround system for the theater. So you actually have both of those aspects live. So you can use 8 analog or AES inputs from the console for maybe QLab and sound effects, and then 24 inputs via AVB could be for 16 RFs or subgroups of RFs, and then maybe the band and some other things going in. But that's kind of neat to be able to have a collinear type situation and a surround situation happening at the same time. An orchestral concert, you might have 2. Is this the one? No, this is just with still 1 Galaxy. A 7.2 collinear system across the stage. You could use 8 analog inputs for utility or whatever, and then use all 24 AVB for localization of instruments or subgroups of instruments. So really lay that orchestra out across the space as you see them and make it very natural sounding. An immersive event where you might have 2 Galaxies and you might have a larger number of outputs and a slightly more complicated map. And I also had the idea of it would be kind of cool to use for a haunted house. I don't have a map there because I don't know what it would look like, but I started thinking, yeah, if it was like haunted house, you could somehow get something cool where you have sound from using OSC, and really make those rooms come to life. It'd be fun. A couple of other quick things that it sounds like there are plugins coming for consoles. They're not ready yet, so I haven't seen them. I don't know that anybody at Ger has seen the plugins yet, but they are coming. They're hoping to integrate them into consoles in a plugin architecture, which would be very cool. And then Jeff's going to show you a quick little demo now of QLab integration more directly, and I'll hand it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Peter. Just going to share my screen here. You guys see that okay?
Yep.
Great. Well, I'll start off by saying that I am no QLab expert. Today's the first time I've opened QLab in many, many years. So my experience comes with a great degree of just starting things out. But I will say it was incredibly easy to get this going. There's really not much to set it up, and you can do some fairly in-depth programming, kind of like Peter showed in Spacemap Go, but you can do it right from QLab. So when you start up a new program, you have the workspace settings option, and the first thing that we need to do is to add Spacemap Go as an option here. As a networked entity that you can connect to. So we have to pick our in my case, Wi-Fi connection to the Galaxy. And then I need the IP address of the unit, which is 10.0.0.5. And then in this case here, the IP address, the port number is 38033. And then as Peter quickly showed, if you look in the settings pane here, there's a system IP address, all that stuff. And then there's general purpose OSC. So you have to, of course, turn this on. And then you need the IP address of the computer that's going to be sending to it. So that's my laptop in this case, the 10.0.0.114, and then that same port number. So once you have those items set, that's really all you need to do. And then from the workspace settings, what Meyer has done is they've posted right on their site. They have a QLab section that's very handy to set this up. And one second here, I'll show you what that looks like. That lets you, it shows you exactly what I just talked about, the settings for the IP addresses, setting up the Spacemap Go networked entity there, the port numbers. And then they get into some actual queues. Whoops, sorry, they've got an OSC guide here that shows you exactly the different functions that they can do. So we can do anything from channel pans, maps, mutes, specific positions in the space maps, the spread option we talked about. You can do preset trajectories, mix levels, all the way down to recalling channel-specific functions, mix levels, or even system presets as well. So very useful amount of stuff. And then they get into some examples of doing them down below. So I'm going to show you just a couple of simple ones there, and you can let me know if you have any questions. I'll just throw this back here so we can still see it. So the OSC commands are quite simple. They're mostly plain text in these cases. So, if I wanted to mute, say, channels 1 to 8, in this case, I use the channel command, the range of channels 1 to 8, mute, and then the 1 designates an on or an off in this case here. So if all goes well, you can see that it muted there. And the same thing on the other side, I can do a 0, turn that back off. So that could be another queue. So to add the network queues, just this button here, and then I could put in the same function there. That would be my mute back on. So fairly straightforward once you've got those going. You can get into some more in-depth things. So I could add one more. I could do something that's fade based. So we can actually do up to 1D or 2D fades as part of this. So I could do a channel, a level fade, and that command looks something like this here. So we have a channel parameter. I'm doing 1 and 2 this time, level, and then I'm using the variable here so that I can actually do a 1D fade in QLab, which allows me to set a trajectory here, and then I can set some parameters. So I could say, on this case, my inputs are already maxed out, so I'll do a fade out. So I'll go from 0 down to say minus 90 over 5 seconds here. So if all works, this, as you can see, those guys start to go down. So fairly straightforward kind of thing. And if you want to go even more complicated, we can do a full-on 2D fade. So that looks more like what a space map consisted of, as Peter was showing. So in the fade section, we would do a 2D fade which gives us, a graphical representation. I have to set my parameters to be a little bit larger than normal. This is just kind of a standard in this case. And then my control in this case would be something like this. And so what I can do is I can grab anywhere in the blue box here, and I can click and drag as an icon there and set that up. And then using the duration here, I can set that to be a parameter that it follows. So very much like you can create the trajectories in Spacemap Go, you can do it in QLab as well too. So you definitely have some more width and things like that options in there, but you can definitely do it all from here if you want. And I can grab it and I can do it in real time here. So same kind of idea, just as it is. I can send that.
Yeah, and the really nice thing about that is the number of places that already have QLab and they're already using it. Even if they're already just using it to control things like mutes and unmutes of the PA, you've already got the OSC connection and you've already got the ability. So you can keep all the programming in one environment that way, instead of having to save it as scenes within the iPad or within the Galaxy. You can actually just create all the motion and location from QLab. You're already programming in there already.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, and so in that case, Jeff, you would use the QLab would load the map though, right? So you would say load map whatever, and it would be the number of the map. So load map 109 or whatever. And then at that point, when you send the trajectory information via OSC that you were doing, it's just on top of that map. So the only thing you'd have to do is load the map, right?
Yeah. It doesn't matter what Spacemap is there. It'll just do that trajectory over top of whatever right. It sees there.
But again, loading the map can be done using OSC. Yeah. Controlling the slider between the two active space maps can be done through OSC. So all of that stuff could just happen auto-magically through OSC.
Yeah, and if you want to do the other option you have, of course, is if you've already built a trajectory, like I've just loaded one in here, I can trigger, of course, playing back that trajectory on that channel. So it's channel 2 trajectory, status, and play. And I should start that guy moving around there. So you can do the same kind of thing. And you can even there's a pause command in here, so you could stop it for a duration, move it along, and then continue. So that's it.
Great. You could probably then get even fancier and get information that's coming in via OSC. So you could have, information about, maybe from lighting or something. As the light moves, you could generate the location information and turn that into OSC so that it moves the trajectory along with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the
transmitters, IR transmitters on the performers or something, so that as they move around the stage.
Yeah, they have integration through Black Tracks, so you can do control that way. So, and then there's also OSCAR that you can integrate into some of the DAWs as well too. So that's the more specific plugin I think that they were referring to. This is more just general integration with the other side of it. So
pretty sophisticated though.
Yeah, to be able to do the trajectory.
To be able to actually draw a trajectory is pretty amazing.
Yeah, and that was, like I said, I had this up and going, and maybe even installing QLab and getting everything connected, no more than 20 to 30 minutes, all said and done. So that's a win for sure.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for showing that. I hadn't looked at the trajectory programming and all that stuff yet, so I appreciate you jumping in.
Anybody have any questions?
Still nothing in the chat.
They're stunned with amazement.
I did have one quick one for you. It kind of comes from building presets and I guess snapshots in this case. How do you go about setting your show up that way? Do you start with a list as going and modify them, or do you kind of build them as you go? Like, what's your kind of base preference for something like this?
For trajectories or for maps?
No, just for like I like just the mixes in general, setting up the queue list and, getting those things set up how you'd want them.
I mean, I kind of think of it in terms of QLab actually, or even
Right.
just LCS Q stacks or whatever. Like, you just think of the order of what it is you're trying to accomplish. And I generally also am paranoid, so I try to have things that are self-healing, right? So if you run a sequence that's supposed to start from faded out, from silence, then the first thing in the queue should actually make sure that it's silent. That you're not relying on the previous queue to have faded something out, so that it starts from silence and then fades up. And in some cases, mostly just probably old habits, I would probably populate the trajectories so that I'm not always using the same channel. I would probably stagger them in some ways, which there's no reason. I mean, unless they overlap, there's no reason not to just continue to use the same channel. But as I say, it's probably just old habits of, the old bingo sheets of having things staggered across your decks or your tracks or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing with this kind of a system, I think, is having the time up front at some point to get the map really great. If the map is representative of what the venue is doing, then the workflow is really, really fast and you can do some pretty great things. So it's really just having that time. So for example, if you're, if you walk into a theater and there's already a great space map in place, then to be able to queue a show is quite fast. If you have to take the time to sit down and build the map and tweak the map, the building the map's really fast, as you saw. And so if you're in a fairly simple situation or a very regular shaped room, it's fairly easy. But as soon as you get into things like under balconies and asymmetry, looking at you, MTC, then it can take more time to fine tune the map. The cool thing is that once you get the trajectories running, you can continue to, it's sort of decorrelated with the map in that you can continue to tweak the map, and the trajectory will just get better, if you know what I mean. Like, if you're doing the helicopter flyover, then and something's jumping because those two speakers in the map are a little too close together, or you need to do a little level offset. You can make that change without having to go back and rebuild the trajectory, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I think that the biggest thing with any of these systems really is getting it so that it reflects the room correctly. And once it does, it's a very powerful tool. So yeah, I don't know if anybody has any questions or any thoughts. Happy to answer anything.
Looks like we're good.
That's good. I mean, the one thing I will say is with coming out, hopefully, touch wood, the other side of this mad time, everything's getting, I don't know about everybody else on the call, but things are getting crazy busy again, and so hopefully that's true for everybody and that everybody stayed safe. But one of the things that's interesting is that in all of this quiet time of space and air and reflection, we've all done our fair share of webinars of learning new technology or trying, new things or training courses, and we all speak 17 languages now. Now it's going to be interesting to come out the other side and try some of these things in practice and actually get out and say, okay, let's put this to work and check it out. So I very much look forward to all of that.
Well, thanks very much, Peter. We appreciate having you back again.
No problem. Happy to do it.